Chapter 1 Isolation's Visitor. The sun was setting. Everything was calm. Amber and gold reflected off the ocean's blue face. The reflection danced like a pair of ballerinas until it reached the banks of the shore. Sitting on the sand, looking out towards the sunset, was a man deep in thought. He watched the sun go down as if he expected it to say something. He was only vaguely aware of the sound of drums coming from the apartment complex behind him and the man flying a drone to get the perfect shot of the sunset. Neither mattered. His thoughts and emotions were as rampant as the colors dancing off the ocean's surface. The man's name was Martin Weatherford. Even sitting down, you could tell the man was tall, 6'4" at the very least. He had prominent cheekbones and 3 freckles on his left cheek that looked like the Big Dipper. A reddish hue from a recovering sunburn adorned the exposed parts of his skin. Then there were his eyes, a vibrant blue that was as intimidating to look at as they were beautiful. His eyes were filled with remorse and fierce sadness. Like a leech, gloom sapped his hope away. The sun began its reunion with the water, its final moments on the horizon before its farewell. Martin's thoughts changed with the sun. Why sunset? Set has so many different definitions, not to mention over 20 expressions starting from the word set. Set in motion, set forth, set one's heart upon. Martin closed his eyes tightly. He had set his heart upon many things and had failed repeatedly. The creation of a family, fulfilling his father's expectations, impressing his nation. Yet it all felt small in comparison to the betrayal he felt. He tried to be understanding of the situation and everything he had been told, but that was not how he was raised. Actions speak louder than words, he echoed. What I set in motion is my doing and no one else's. I am to act on situations, not be acted upon. The drone crashed into the waves. Its constant buzzing was engulfed by the low roar of the ocean. A muffled whimper put a smirk on Martin's face as the man set out to salvage the drone. In the distance, yells from the drummer's parents silenced the beat. The calm made a welcome return. The sound of crashing waves set in all around him. Set, having a specified direction in motion. I envy you, Mr. Sun. Martin stood up and brushed the sand off his hands. Time to head back home, he said to the ocean. Martin made his way southward alongside the breaking waves. He lived almost as close to the Mexican border as possible. The town of Imperial Beach, California had become his new home. 1112 Seaside Avenue was his safe haven. Although it had been only 6 months since he had isolated himself, he felt subtle changes freeing him from past attachments. His new haircut was an example of this change. Past societal pressures had pushed him to nearly commit some unspeakable things. He shuddered at the thought. Martin gazed back towards the horizon as he reached where the sand met the cement. The sky was in splendid display, its colors splashing across the ocean and the clouds. All that was missing was the Hallelujah chorus. Something reached into the deepest corners of Martin's mourning heart that he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Optimism. For the first time since he'd left home over a year ago, he felt optimism's blissful reassurance. Things may not have been ideal, but somehow, he knew they would get better. With the last sliver of light, the sun made its escape behind the horizon, leaving remnants of red and amber speckled across the water and clouds. May I also leave an imprint on humankind as beautiful as you when I am gone, Mr. Sun, whispered Martin. With that, Martin gestured toward the sun, like a monk praying with his ring fingers bent. An odd gesture to the outside world, but one of the highest respects to those familiar with its meaning. Martin walked around the corner to the front entrance of his apartment. He rented from a large woman who owned the place by the name of Arlene Palermo. An orthopedic surgeon by trade, she was of Portuguese descent and loved theatrics. She was a big fan of Martin because he had read every Shakespeare play she had and could quote lines and discuss the underlying meanings. From Trinculo's lines from The Tempest to Hamlet's to be or not to be speech, Martin had them down. Although most things he read he never forgot. Safe to say, Martin was Arlene Palermo's favorite tenant and made no effort to hide it. Every time their paths crossed, she would greet Martin in the most formal of speech from which Martin would match. It was common courtesy for Martin, but just like common sense, common courtesy wasn't so common, as Arlene would say. Miss Palermo stood on the sidewalk, looking completely preoccupied by something. She whipped around, frantically looking in all directions before quickly resting her eyes on Martin. Panic was in her eyes, and no sign of theatrics were on display. Genuine surprise filled her expressive face. "Good evening, Miss Palermo. Is everything all right?" asked Martin. "Martin, oh, thank goodness you've arrived. I was cleaning the windows when I looked down and saw someone come to your front door covered head to toe in a tattered robe. I thought it strange because it's been rather warm lately, but then as I was walking to the door, there was this flash of light, and it startled me so much that I hesitated, and then—" "Miss Palermo, please, calm down, madam. I'm sure it was just some local kids attempting some sort of prank." "No, but that's just it, Martin dear. When I worked up the courage to shoo him away, he was nowhere to be found. What's more, as soon as I made it down the stairs, what did I see? A child on your front step!" Silence fell between them as confusion overtook Martin. "Come with me, my dear. I should have gone to the child first instead of looking for the deserter. Come, 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 come." Miss Palermo walked to the front of the apartment with Martin faster than he had ever seen her move. She was surprisingly spry, despite her age and size. Reaching the front of Martin's apartment, their demeanor quickly changed to a quieter one. There was, in fact, a baby sound asleep in what appeared to be singed blankets. The faint smell of smoke hung in the air. "Miss Palermo, may I?" whispered Martin, gesturing to the child. "By all means, Martin dear." Inspecting the child carefully, Martin started looking for any other contents the child may have arrived with. The child had golden brown skin and brown hair with amber sprinkled throughout. It lit up with the light, making it look like coals on the baby's head. Martin's eyes settled on a piece of paper tucked underneath the child's head. As carefully as he could, he lifted the baby's head and beckoned Miss Palermo over. "Please grab the letter, Miss Palermo." She glided over quietly, leaned in, and gently slid the paper out from under the infant's head. Cautiously, Martin lowered the child's head back to its original position. Right before he could retrieve his hand, the baby gently grabbed his ring finger. Reassurance filled the baby's face, coupled with an adorable yawn. Martin smiled. Gently, Martin picked up the child and cradled him in his arms. In response, the child immediately turned over to make itself more comfortable. "What have you been through, young one? Who are you?" Returning his gaze to Miss Palermo, her face changed expressions almost as fast as it changed colors. Glancing at the piece of paper, her eyes widened and then looked back at Martin. "It's addressed to you," Miss Palermo hissed, causing the child to flinch. The child squeezed Martin's ring finger a little bit tighter. "What?" Martin mouthed, his eyes widening with surprise. "Did they find me? No, that's impossible. I was too thorough and far too random. Even I didn't know where I would end up when I set off." Martin rolled his eyes. "There's that word again." "Come into my apartment where it's more comfortable, Miss Palermo. When you're ready, go ahead and read the letter." With the ripped letter in hand, she whipped out an ungodly amount of keys from her pocket. The keys jangled while she located the one that opened Martin's apartment. With a swift turn, she opened the door. Martin turned on the living room lights with his hip and then turned to Miss Palermo. With a nod, she began to read. "Martin, he is everything you have grown up knowing and everything I hoped he would be. Words cannot fully express how much he means to me, and I would do anything to see he doesn't get hurt again by the circumstances surrounding me. Before he takes his rightful place leading the nation, he will need you. Grant him some of the light that has so abundantly been placed inside of you. The tale between us is a long and complicated one. Nevertheless, there is no one I trust more. I will tell you everything that has transpired between us in person the next time we meet. But before I sign off, I will say this much. I love him for all he is, but hate myself for all the pain I have caused him. Bring him back to me when the time is right. May your light illuminate the darkness before you. Marcella. The handwriting was absolutely horrid. There could be no mistake. The writing was hers. The parchment was smaller than normal, covered in soot, and ripped cleanly at the top and a little bit by the signature. The rip must have been recent because that was the cleanest part of the paper. Confusion and questions filled Martin's mind as he reread the letter in Miss Palermo's hand. The envelope had the baby's name on it, Cyrus Ganymede. Martin shook his head. How did they find me? Is this really her child? What should I do? Looking back at Miss Palermo, Martin asked, Did you see anything else, Miss Palermo? You arrived only moments after I descended. I have told you everything, Martin dear, she replied with both the fear and the strength of someone desperately trying to clear their name. I will unwrap him from this blanket to see if anything else came with him. Careful he doesn't get a chill. Just as soon as Martin began, he stopped. He might be. Miss Palermo, could you be a doll and warm up some milk for the child? He might be hungry when he wakes, asked Martin with a thick layer of charisma and a breathtaking smile he knew would surely convince her. Oh, of course, Martin dear. So considerate of you, really. Why didn't I think of that? It will be ready in a flash. Raising her finger up as if it were a sword, she pointed herself towards the kitchen and marched over like a member of a marching band. Never a dull moment with Miss Palermo. As she rummaged through the cabinets, Martin turned his back to the kitchen. He glanced behind his shoulder to make sure Miss Palermo was preoccupied with the task he had given her. As carefully as a collector unwrapping a relic, Martin began unraveling the child from his blue blanket. Besides some light burns and smudges from the ash, the child's face was spotless. Martin switched from cradling the baby in his arms to an upright position against his chest. So, do you know this, Marcella? Miss Palermo asked as a pan clanged to the ground. The clanging from the kitchen woke the child. A pained and tired cry escaped his lips. Yes, I know this Marcella. At least, I thought I knew her. Martin slowly uncovered the child's neck. The blanket was the most burned on the backside, and Martin could see that some of the flames had scorched Cyrus's neck. No wonder he'd started to cry. The skin was red and slightly blistered. What will you do with the child? We could make some calls to the boy's extended family after the milk is ready. Martin unwrapped the rest of the blanket, revealing the child's torso. Martin's eyes widened and he let out an audible gasp. Utter disbelief filled his chest as he almost dropped the child. Startled by the sudden movement, the child began to cry loudly. Oh dear, said Miss Palermo, peeking her head from the kitchen. It must have been all the ruckus I made when I dropped the pan. The milk should be simmering in a minute or two. Would you like me to hold the little guy for a bit? Quickly covering the child's torso, Martin whirled around. Miss Palermo, Martin said, louder than he should have. What is it? Distress returned to her face. Martin collected himself and then continued. The child is burned on his neck. Look, Martin said, revealing just enough evidence. Miss Palermo began changing colors again. Great big tears welled up in her green eyes as she beheld the child's blistered red skin. Let's take Cyrus in right now and get him treated, said Martin. I don't think his burns are too bad, but I would ask you to look over him when we get to the hospital. Of course, dear. This little angel deserves nothing but the best. Martin gave a slight smirk at the comment. After we finish at the hospital, I'll need to make a stop at the supermarket. It's a little bare in here for a child. Perhaps you can help me? Martin said, raising an optimistic eyebrow. Like a soldier who had come to terms with the battle before her, courage and determination returned to Miss Palermo. She gulped and then nodded fiercely. Absolutely. Be quick now. Miss Palermo turned off the stove, poured the lukewarm water into the drain, and then went and collected her things from her apartment upstairs. She returned panting after a couple of seconds with her purse and an overcoat. One more thing, Miss Palermo, before we embark, Martin said with stout conviction. There will be no calls after we are done. I will be raising the child. I am now Cyrus's caretaker. The look of determination on Martin's face was quickly matched by Miss Palermo's. With the same conviction, she placed one hand on the back of the child's head and the other on Martin's shoulder. Looking directly into Martin's eyes, she said, Of course you are. Chapter 2. Graduation. 11 years later. Cyrus yawned. Graduation was taking forever. Graduating middle school was something of an accomplishment and meant a lot to the parents. This graduation ceremony had a speaker which Cyrus believed was a bit excessive. Him. Your scholastic excellence in spite of your challenges inspire your fellow classmates. Being the top of your class at such a young age is an impressive accomplishment, Cyrus. Your classmates will be happy to hear from you at the graduation, his principal had said the week prior. Cyrus chuckled to himself. His classmates were in the same boat he was, trying to make the ceremony go as fast as possible so summer could finally begin. The only thing inspiring about this ceremony would be the end. Being the top of a middle school class was hardly something Cyrus considered as an accomplishment. School had always been easy for him. Skipping 2 grades and graduating middle school at age 11 was no big deal to Cyrus, but his classmates didn't like him any better for it either. No one likes being reminded someone 3 years younger can outscore them on every test. The way they treated him was like he was an alien from outer space. Speaking of aliens, where is Martian sitting again? Cyrus scanned the audience and quickly found him, front and center, as usual. Cyrus hadn't been able to pronounce his T's as a child, so Martin came out as Martian. Even long after Cyrus had started pronouncing his words correctly, Martian stuck around. He might as well have been a Martian with how he acted. He spoke with unparalleled eloquence no matter the situation, and had the memory of an elephant. Everyone has a formal and non-formal mode they switch on and off depending on the situation and circumstance. Martin had formal and super formal. Cyrus had grown used to the flabbergasted looks on the faces of teachers, parents, and principals every time Martin opened his mouth. He used to find it entertaining, but it quickly got old. He lived with it, after all, so he was exposed to it day in and day out. Sitting next to Martin was Miss Palermo. Giddy and smiling, she was enthusiastic about watching Cyrus speak. She was treating this like it was opening night of a Broadway musical, and Cyrus was the lead. She really needs to get out more. Cyrus allowed a small smile. He was grateful for their support. Even if this ceremony for graduating middle school was a complete waste of time, he had 2 people in the crowd who cared for him. Our next speaker is one of your fellow classmates and has overcome some tremendous obstacles in his life. May I present your valedictorian, Cyrus Weatherford? A weak applause from his fellow students was overshadowed by some very enthusiastic cheers from Miss Palermo. Yeah, Cyrus! Woot woot! A feigned smile to hide his embarrassment crept across Cyrus's face. He then pushed the controls of his wheelchair and made his way to the lowered pulpit. The ceremony was finally over. Parents gushed and smiles returned to all of the kids' faces. Cyrus was also smiling. Summer is here. To Cyrus, this meant series binging, comic books, and some extra free time. There was a catch in Cyrus's house, though. Martin put education and well-being as a top priority. Therefore, Cyrus had to spend as much time reading as he did watching series, movies, or animes. Cyrus thought he found a loophole for his reading requirements by choosing comic books and animated stories. but Martin quickly caught on. The rule became he had to alternate between the two. Every other book had to be an actual book. He could not read two comic books in a row, a rule Cyrus found very annoying, while Martin found it motivating. As Martin would say, you'll find that most books in this world don't have pictures to go along with them. Best start getting used to it. Martin made his way up to the stage with Miss Palermo smiling as they went. Cyrus, that was wonderful. Absolutely splendid oral presentation. The delivery, along with the message you conveyed, these kids truly do not know how lucky they were to have you as their speaker, swooned Miss Palermo. Martin smiled at the enthusiasm Miss Palermo displayed, then turned to Cyrus and said with a slight smirk, Yes, your oral presentation was wonderful. What would you compare his speech to, Miss Palermo? Here we go. Cyrus hated when Martin did this. He would egg Miss Palermo on and ask her to compare something Cyrus said or did to a favorite play she had seen or a show she was watching. It always left Cyrus red in the cheeks. She always went overboard. I want to compare it to the speech King Theoden gave his Rohirrim right before breaking the orcs' ranks, she started thoughtfully. The one where they all yell death before they begin their charge? Yes, that one. Thank you, Martin dear. The feeling right before the charge, the motivation I felt with the emotion that was evoked. The feeling was similar as you delivered your message. Excellent oral presentation, just excellent, said Miss Palermo, trailing off. Can we not use the words oral presentation around these middle schoolers, please? They already have enough ammunition against me from my speech, asked Cyrus desperately. He could hear soft chuckles around him and felt his cheeks start to blush. Martin smiled a devilish smile, the type he gave when he was about to say something he thought was clever. Cyrus braced for impact. Turning to Miss Palermo, he said, Very well. We will make our rounds and then return home. Cyrus, say thank you to Miss Palermo for attending your graduation and listening to your speech, or I'll leave you here. Miss Palermo snorted. Cyrus didn't want to hang around, but Martin insisted he thank his teachers. It took another hour before they reached the car. Martin shook every single teacher's hand, looked them in the eye, and acknowledged their hard work. Cyrus echoed everything Martin said and graciously thanked each one. Despite being impatient to get home as quickly as possible, Cyrus knew how important manners were. Martin had drilled into him again and again that courtesy and gratitude were true signs of intelligence. Common courtesy is not so common, Cyrus. Don't be a commoner, he would say. The looks on the teachers' faces mirrored the energy Martin displayed. Appreciation filled their faces, and Cyrus couldn't help but feel glad every time one of his teachers' faces lit up. At the end of the day, Cyrus saw with his own eyes how saying thank you with true sincerity filled people's hearts. Always a learning experience with Martin. The drive back was exciting. No more school. The amount of binge watching and video games he had planned was unreal. He had 3 video games he wanted to play all the way through. 2 of them he had already finished, but was starting over for the joy of it. The third one was Martin's gift to Cyrus for finishing at the top of his class. The main character was the last fighter added to his favorite fighting game. It was a big deal. Cyrus could hardly wait. He beamed as he looked at his reflection in the window of the car. Cyrus had a very unique look. He had light brown skin with a ton of dark freckles canvassed across his face. Curly brown hair with auburn strands speckled his head like burning sparks. Yet, that wasn't his most interesting feature. Cyrus had heterochromia iridium, 2 different colored eyes. Cyrus's left eye was a hazel brown, almost yellow, while his right eye was bluer than the sky on a clear day. Cyrus had always liked his appearance because it was unique from everyone else's. His peers in school tended to avoid him, though. The look, mixed with his intelligence, was a little too much for people his age to handle. Parents and teachers lapped it up, though. The bump right before their house jolted Cyrus from his trance. They had finally arrived. 1112 Seacoast Drive. A pretty easy address to remember. Martin got out first, as usual, and looped around to the passenger side to help Cyrus. They had an ADA van equipped with a ramp that would slide out so Cyrus could wheel in and out of the car. Luckily, Martin had always lived on the first floor. Miss Palermo used to live on the second floor, but moved to the first floor about 7 years ago. Her mobility had been deteriorating, and stairs had become more difficult for her. She was Martin and Cyrus's next-door neighbor, for better or worse. Cyrus had been diagnosed when he was 5 years old with a condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, DMD for short. His reflexes became slower and slower as he grew, and he'd become almost completely paralyzed from the neck down. He had been wheelchair bound since his first memories. The upside was the acronym DMD sounded like Dungeons and Dragons, which Cyrus thought was kind of cool. Cyrus still had control of his arms below the elbows and could rotate his head slightly. Everything else was paralyzed. Being able to move even a little bit lifted Cyrus's spirits because he hated feeling helpless, primarily when it came to eating. He was always thankful to Martin for being able and willing to help him, but Cyrus still felt a twinge of embarrassment. He couldn't help it. Part of the reason he believed Martin always gave him things to do was because he didn't want him to feel sorry for himself. It was annoying most of the time, but Cyrus understood this ploy early on and kept doing them regardless. Although he would never admit it to Martin, being busy did keep Cyrus's mind off the fact that he was wheelchair bound. Being busy is the best remedy for feeling sorry for oneself, Martin would say. As they made their way into the house, Cyrus set his wheelchair to full speed and zoomed quickly to, as Martin liked to call, the spot. Right in front of the TV, right in the cross breeze of the house with viewing access to the kitchen. Ideal in all aspects. Martian, please hand me the controller. I can hardly wait, asked Cyrus, trying to contain his excitement. The game had been downloading since 8 a.m. Steady now, Cyrus. Allow me to place your personal items in your room before that, replied Martin with a smile. Okay, said Cyrus, a little deflated. But I will do it quickly. With that, Martin briskly glided to Cyrus's room. 5 seconds later, he reappeared and handed Cyrus the controller. Martin was the greatest guy sometimes. With palpable excitement, Cyrus switched the console on and anxiously awaited for the game as Martin made his way to the kitchen. Couple things to remember for these next couple days, Cyrus. First, tomorrow, Miss Palermo will be preparing dinner as a way of saying congratulations. Best behavior, please, and compliment the food regardless of what is served. I don't want another eggplant parmesan incident. Cyrus smiled. It was funny in hindsight. Miss Palermo had undercooked the eggplant, so it had retained its squishy texture. It was Cyrus's first time having eggplant, and he didn't know what to expect. Right as they'd started eating, Cyrus asked Martin, right in front of Miss Palermo, if the eggplant was still supposed to be raw. Good times. Second, after dinner, I want to play a game of chess with you. Don't tank it this time, or I'll make you play another. Last time they'd played, Cyrus had intentionally lost as fast as he could so he could get back to the show he was watching. The entire time, Martin kept eyeing him and asking, Are you sure? Martin caught on and also decided to play terribly. This annoyed Cyrus because it made the game go longer. The game deteriorated to such a point where Cyrus began thinking he could beat Martin. Once Martin saw the effort return, he stopped tanking and handedly defeated Cyrus. Cyrus had never beaten Martin. Lastly, I was speaking with some of your teachers, and all of them recommended you as a tutor. I then went to the high school looking for something that aligned with these recommendations and found something. Dread filled Cyrus's heart. Every time Martin went on one of his little missions to find something for Cyrus, he did. In order for you to graduate, you need community service, and after talking with Principal Hemrick, I discovered that Mar Vista High School has a transfer student tutor program. You start Monday, 10 to 12, every day of the week. Cyrus's jaw dropped. 10 to 12? Every day? Cyrus already had those 2 hours planned out. Next week is superhero week. Martin, please, pleaded Cyrus. Let me have one summer without a random class, coding seminar, painting lesson, or anything else along those lines. It's already decided, Cyrus. You have a brilliant mind, and you must share that with others. That is the best way to grow. It will also give you an opportunity to be the first point of contact for incoming students. Befriend them. Moving to a new place can be an uncomfortable experience. Make it a positive one for them. Cyrus shook his head in disbelief. He had been looking forward to letting his brain rot completely with the amount of video games, movies, and books he had lined up. I need to give you your injections before you dive into your story. The faster I do that, the faster you can start. Cyrus grimaced a little bit. With the condition that he had, Martin had signed him up for an experimental treatment that called for injections all along his vertebrae. Being that he was paralyzed for the most part, he didn't feel too much pain, but after the injections were finished, it left his body achy and sore. It was not comfortable, but it was hopefully going to make him better. Cyrus knew his time was limited. Most kids with his condition never saw 20. It always felt like there was a giant axe over his head, and as much as Martin kept him busy, he always held that image in the back of his mind. Time seemed to be against him from a very young age. Death was something he had come to terms with. Cyrus's natural optimism, along with Martin's missions, were what held back the lurking tides of despair. Okay, could we do that now so I can at least enjoy my first weekend of freedom uninterrupted? Asked Cyrus. Martin nodded, retrieved the needles and medicine, and then began. Despite the treatment being experimental, Cyrus had been undergoing it as long as he could remember. He did not have too many memories using his legs. The sickness got him from a young age. Cyrus winced as he felt the needles pierce his flesh by his neck. As the shots continued descending, he felt them less and less. It was never pleasant. Cyrus usually had a reoccurring dream after his injections where he could not only run, but was able to fly. The sense of freedom he felt was so liberating. Emotion would swell in his chest, and he would wake up with tears of happiness. What he would give to feel that in real life. Chapter 3. Terrific Tutor. Cyrus woke up at 8 a.m. This was late for him, considering he usually woke up at 6:30 every morning during the school year. In Cyrus's mind, however, it might as well have been 3 in the morning. It was summer vacation. There should have been a requirement of nothing earlier than 10 a.m. It usually took an hour for Martin to help Cyrus get ready, have breakfast, and leave. Martin was obsessed with routine. Cyrus could hear rustling in the kitchen and the smell of bacon, accompanied with its usual sizzle. Cyrus was still upset at Martin. He had spent the weekend using every known method of persuasion to try to get out of tutoring. From, I don't know the material well enough, to telling Martin it was his summer and he was being forced into helping people against his will. Amused, Martin responded the same way every time. You're going, Cyrus. You need to learn to help people with what you know, especially when you don't want to. It was pointless. The man was impenetrable. Convincing Martin to let him off the hook was harder than breaking into Fort Knox. The truth was, Cyrus was anxious. Friends weren't a strong suit of his. He knew how to socialize when the time came, but he was shy. Being confined to a wheelchair made it so he couldn't do most activities with the other kids in his grade. Not to mention, puberty was running rampant with his classmates, while it hadn't hit him. Yet. Cyrus shuddered at the thought of having the puberty talk with Martin. Cyrus found comfort in books and reading. Martin told Cyrus that, like himself, he was a social introvert. He had his thoughts and knew how to share them, but also knew how to hide them. Cyrus rolled his head, stretching as he woke. He stayed quiet and closed his eyes. Maybe Martian forgot. I could pretend to be asleep and at least make us late? Cyrus opened his eyes. Yeah, right. Forget or be late. Not Martian. The elephant memory combined with the punctuality of a product geek on release day. That was Martin. There was no way around it. Cyrus sighed in defeat. Cyrus, you up? Carpe diem. Time to seize the day. Breakfast is about ready. I'll be up in a minute. No tones of amnesia there. The sounds of plates being set on the table, along with the intoxicating smell of bacon, signaled it was time to get up. Footsteps came down the hall, and then Cyrus's door opened. Good morning, sunshine, said Martin with a smile. Breakfast is served. Martin lifted Cyrus out of the bed and placed him in his wheelchair. Cyrus felt like a rag doll. Embarrassment still tugged at Cyrus, but whenever Martin detected it, he usually diffused it by calling Cyrus my little rag doll or dancing moronically in circles until Cyrus smiled. Martin always told Cyrus he relied on him for his arm workout. The man had dad jokes for days, but they made Cyrus smile. Martin wheeled him to the table and helped him with his breakfast. The bacon, per usual, tasted as good as it smelled. After breakfast began the usual routine: shower, dress, prepare for the day, injection. Martin worked at the hospital with Miss Palermo, and together they researched treatments for DMD. It seemed like the heavens had smiled upon Cyrus when he was diagnosed. Despite the intensity of his diagnosis, his doctor lived next door, and his guardian was trained to attend to his needs. Martin had become a registered nurse and assisted Miss Palermo in her practice. Miss Palermo was an orthopedic surgeon, one of the best around. She always said she would retire, but she had been saying that for as long as Cyrus could remember. Martin opened the front door and then looked back towards Cyrus. The moment their eyes met, Cyrus slumped his neck and closed his eyes in dramatic fashion. Martin was deliberately taking away his summer. Chin up, Ragdoll. It's a beautiful day to help someone. They made their way to the car and loaded up. This wasn't how Cyrus had envisioned his summer vacation. Miss Palermo peeked her head out her front door and shouted a loud farewell. Despite the drive, he counted the things he would rather do than tutor incoming students. Eat broccoli, have a staring contest with the sun, talk to Miss Palermo about her favorite musicals. This is the pits. Welcome to Mar Vista High School, my young mariner, said Martin. Thanks. He was now a mariner. Yay. School was school, and thus far the social aspect had greatly disappointed Cyrus. Mostly because, as Martin had told him, he was a 35-year-old stuck in an 11-year-old body. To this, Cyrus would respond that Martin was a 75-year-old grandpa stuck in a 30-year-old body. Martin always graciously thanked him for the compliment. Cyrus's IQ, along with the maturity for his age, made most conversations boring for him. He was of the opinion that most of what the teenagers talked about was inconsequential and petty. The hormones talked 75% of the time, and gossip the other 25%. First world problems tended to be his thought whenever people in his grade spoke. A bright green roof and a painted Poseidon welcomed Cyrus to his summer of purgatory. They made their way to the first classroom after the main gym. A dull gray color oozed across the walls. Not the most appealing color to encourage education. The building was labeled with a large J before you entered. What does the J stand for? Jail, probably. They entered the classroom, and Cyrus noticed 4 other souls in the room. There were 2 male students, 1 female student, and a female teacher. Martin quickly took charge. He introduced himself and Cyrus to the teacher, a woman as bland as the building. She was thin, with pursed lips and a straight nose. Dark blue eyes hid behind spherical glasses and graying brunette hair. Her name was Miss Dougal, and as Martin began to speak, His contagious eloquence shot an involuntary smile to her pursed lips. There it is, the Martian charm. Cyrus rolled his eyes. After coming to her senses, Miss Dougal turned around and began introducing everyone. The two young men are Luis and Todd. Luis is from Texas, and Todd is from Michigan. The two boys turned, waved unenthusiastically, and returned back to their phones. Luis was a short-set Latino, most likely Mexican. He had the pubescent mustache hairs that most of the other boys in Cyrus's grade had. Some of the girls, too. Cyrus suppressed a smile. Todd, on the other hand, looked like he hadn't seen a lot of sun. He had a few freckles, much lighter than Cyrus's. Messy brown hair sprouted from his head. His teeth protruded from his face, reminding Cyrus of a foal. Todd's expression was that of shock when he saw Cyrus. The young lady is... Oh, I have such a hard time with this name, Miss Dougal trailed off. How do you pronounce your name again? Is it Aulolo? Thick, curly brown hair whipped around in the corner and revealed a golden-skinned girl with a fierce expression. It's Auli'i, she said as if she were correcting a child. Auli-me, said Miss Dougal hopefully. The girl sighed and shook her head. I'll help you. Ow, like someone stepped on your toe. Li, like the name, and then E, like the letter. Au-li-e. Auli'i. Martin seemed intrigued. Where are you from, Miss Auli'i? Asked Martin, executing the name flawlessly. Auli'i smiled at his success. I am from Hawaii. Mr. What was your name? My name is Martin Weatherford, and this is Cyrus. Hawaii? The Big Island? Or are you from one of the other 7 inhabited islands? Auli'i's smile changed to raised eyebrows. Well, Mr. Weatherford, it seems you know something about geography. I was born on Oahu, the main island, where most of the population and military base reside. You have lived in a beautiful place, Miss Auli'i. I myself have never been, but I do hope I can visit one day. Pleasure meeting you. Auli'i smiled and nodded her head. Martin turned to Cyrus, gave a nod in her direction, and then flashed a smile. Cyrus looked the other way. Thank you so much, Miss Dougal. Use him as you see fit. Cyrus, I will see you at noon. Farewell, everyone. Use him as you see fit? What am I, a slave? Cyrus felt abandoned. This is so unfair. Miss Dougal turned to the class. We will be covering basics in algebra. Let's start with a quick lesson, then I will have Cyrus help Luis, and I will help you too. After the lesson, Miss Dougal handed out worksheets that were due at the end of class. Cyrus's summer sentence had begun. Algebra was a subject Cyrus found extremely easy. Luis was in a bad mood and pretended he knew the material. Every question they began, Cyrus asked if he knew where to start, to which Cyrus would say he knew and didn't need to prove anything. Then, he would proceed to do it wrong, and Cyrus would step in and help him finish the problem. Pretty soon, Luis started making Cyrus do the worksheet. He would ask Cyrus to start, saying he would check his work. Cyrus tried to be helpful and understanding, but he quickly caught on to Luis's scheme. This kid is just using me. I'm not doing another problem for him. The kid was very snide about having done nothing thus far. Cyrus, on the other hand, was very annoyed. Arriving to question 13, Luis tried the same routine. Okay, go for it. I'll take notes on this one too. Cyrus stared at the kid, feeling his rage build up. Actually, this one, I'm going to let you do. No, it's fine. Keep going. You're really on a roll. No, said Cyrus with a shrug. The rest I will merely supervise. You've got this. Disgust filled Luis's face as he stared down Cyrus. Perking up what little chest he had, he looked at Cyrus and whispered menacingly, Why not? You have something better to do? Yes, I do. Help you learn how to do it, replied Cyrus in a normal voice. Well, then I'm going to get some help from someone who actually knows what they're doing. Miss Dougal, I need some help. Cyrus doesn't know what he's doing. Miss Dougal was busy helping Todd and Auli'i, but she bought it. Very well. Auli'i, could you switch places with Louise, please? Todd's eyes widened. He also seemed uncomfortable with Louise's presence. Of course, Miss Dougal, said Auli'i graciously. Scooping her things, she made it over to the table before Louise had even begun to stand. Louise quickly grabbed his things. As he left, he looked over to Cyrus and mouthed the words, stupid. Ali'i furrowed her brow. Louise's eyes met hers, and she made no attempt to hide how unimpressed she was. Louise sneered at her too, then scampered over to Miss Dougal. Cyrus found himself getting more and more angry with Martin for forcing him into this. Ali'i took her seat in front of Cyrus and then gave him a warm smile. Cyrus felt his cheeks turn red. Sorry about that, jerk, whispered Ali'i. I know I introduced myself to your father, but I'm Ali'i. Ali'i fo'ala to'alasi. Ali'i extended her hand. Cyrus blinked a couple of times, trying to comprehend what the heck she had just said. Cyrus Weatherford, he replied, wiggling his fingers. Ali'i reached over and shook his hand with a smile. Louise coughed loudly and shot them both a look. Was he trying to make you do everything? Asked Ali'i. Cyrus's jaw dropped. Yeah, he did. Uh, how'd you know? Same thing with that Todd kid. Not the brightest one of the bunch. I could visibly see Miss Dougal getting annoyed at his lack of effort, she said, shaking her head. Cyrus smiled. Maybe it wasn't going to be that bad of a day after all. Returning to a normal voice, Ali asked, I have a couple questions on some of these. I was able to get through about half. Could you help me? Yeah, just fine. What can I help you with on the assignment? This Ali'i is exotic looking too, thought Cyrus. Cyrus began helping Ali'i solve some equations with fractions in them. Ali'i was smart and only asked for help when she wanted clarification and when she'd finished a problem. She was motivated, and that made Cyrus's job infinitely easier. An hour flew by, and when the clock reached 11, Miss Dougal excused herself for a moment to go to the restroom. Noticing the lack of adult supervision, Louise looked up, and then, in what Cyrus guessed was an attempt to impress Ali'i, said to Cyrus, That's a nice ride you got. Must have been what got you the girl. He imitated rolling the wheels of a wheelchair. Todd contorted his face and began uttering hoarse sounds. Cyrus believed Todd was laughing, but wasn't sure. Louise fed off of Todd's hoarse laugh, but as he turned back around, Ali'i was pointing a finger in his face. Cyrus hadn't even seen her move. You apologize to Cyrus this moment. Louise flinched from surprise. Todd's hoarse laugh squealed to a halt. I was just kidding, Louise said with a nervous laugh. I'm not. Apologize. The AC was the only sound in the room. Louise sat up straight. I'm not apologizing to that cripple. Ali'i grabbed Louise by the ear and, in the blink of an eye, stood him up, marched him to the classroom entrance, and threw him out. Not missing a beat, Ali'i pirouetted and returned to her seat with the grace of a ballerina. Todd's buck-toothed jaw had dropped. Cyrus sat in stunned silence. So, problem 13 has these integers. Can you make sure I did this one correctly? Cyrus stared at her, bewilderment quite apparent on his face. Ali'i stared back. I don't like bullies. Cyrus returned to the page with a nervous smile. Miss Dougal returned 5 minutes later, quickly scanned the room, then asked where Louise was. He was began Ali'i. Being called by his parents, Miss Dougal. Apparently, there was a family function today. He got a call and off he went. I couldn't tell exactly what it was because it was in Spanish, said Cyrus, borrowing some Martian charm. Ali'i gave him a smirk and a raised eyebrow of approval. Ali'i then shot Todd a serious look that seemed to say, Right? Todd flinched and shook his horsey noggin. Miss Dougal shrugged her shoulders and went back to helping Todd. Thanks for the save, said Ali'i with a smile. I was just going to come clean and tell her what I did. Her smile was breathtaking. The white of her teeth contrasted her golden brown skin. My pleasure. I figured this Louise kid wouldn't be in a hurry to tell anyone he was ushered out the door by a girl. What do you mean by a girl? Her expression turned serious. Cyrus got a little nervous. It had not been his intent to offend her. In situations like this, Cyrus had a sarcastic defense mechanism that usually kicked in. This time, he was coming up blank. I only meant his pride was hurt. No bully wants to admit they were beaten by a girl, someone younger, or, in my case, a cripple. Ali'i's expression softened with a hint of pain. Cyrus felt a twinge of guilt. He usually didn't play the cripple card, but after what he saw, he definitely wanted to be on Auli'i's good side. You're probably right. Bully or not, he had it coming. My mother and I just got away from a bully. Cyrus became very cautious. He hadn't really talked with anybody seriously about their life. He was used to being, well, ignored. Was it was it someone from your school? No, it was my father. I'm uh I'm so sorry. Sorry? Sorry for what? Your pain. They sat in silence for a minute. You want to know something, Cyrus? Asked Ali with a half smile. Sure. You seem to have a personality that is as interesting as your appearance. Do you want to be my first friend here in San Diego? Friend. The word seemed foreign, but Cyrus couldn't shake the warm feeling from head to toe. Cyrus became aware of the baboonish smile that had crept across his face. After he regained his composure, he replied with, Sure, just don't beat me up, okay? Otherwise, you only have Todd left. Don't give me a reason to. They both smiled horsey smiles. Chapter 4 The Chief June tutoring had flown by, and Cyrus was the better for it. Auli'i and Cyrus had really bonded during Cyrus's indentured servitude. Martin gave him the eye every time he picked him up. Cyrus forced himself not to smile to avoid the looks from Martin, the look of credit belongs to me that Cyrus hated. He knew Martin did it jokingly to irritate him, but Cyrus hated the thought of Martin using this experience to justify future activities. The proof was in the pudding, though. Cyrus had perhaps made the coolest friend possible. Ali'i was cultured in every sense of the word. She was well read, feisty as a firecracker, and could keep up with Cyrus's semantics. She was better at roasting Cyrus than he was of her, and she reminded him of that fact constantly. She said it was to establish dominance, to which Cyrus would shake his head and try to hide his smile. Cyrus's sarcastic comments never went unnoticed by Auli'i, and she always had one in response. They were two peas in a pod. Ali'i was not very familiar with tablets or phones, which really surprised Cyrus since everyone his age or older had a phone and was always on it. Cyrus showed Ali'i how to use them, and just like everything else, she picked it up quick. A woman by the name of Kamalani was Ali'i's mother. She had made quite the impression on Cyrus by smothering him in the most back-breaking hug and wettest kiss he had ever received. Martin had also been taken by surprise, but was absolutely charmed by the woman. Kamalani had started a new job, so she couldn't always pick up Ali'i. The moment Cyrus found this out, he insisted Ali'i catch a ride with him back home. It didn't take a lot of convincing, and Kamalani was over the moon. They lived in the opposite direction, in between an old donut shop and the drive-in theater where the flea market took place. It was a considerable distance to walk. Fine, I'll let you hang out around me a little bit more. Geez, Ali'i had said. You flatter yourself. I'm just doing my good deed for the month. Cyrus got a flick in the ear for that comment. She was incredibly fast. Auli'i had extended an invitation for Cyrus and Martin to come over for lunch after their last day of tutoring. Ali'i's mother was cooking up a fish called mahi mahi. Cyrus had never eaten it, but Martin was particularly interested when she told him about the fish. When Cyrus asked him if he had had it before, he said cryptically, "Yes, but it's been a while." "You clean up nice," said Ali'i with a flirtatious look at Cyrus rolling into the classroom. "Wish I could say the same," replied Cyrus. Ali'i chuckled. They'd finished tutoring, and although it would be a month until school started back up, they'd promised to see each other outside of school. "So, what we gonna do?" asked Ali'i. "I don't know. What you want to do?" "I don't know. What you want to do?" replied Ali'i with an eye roll. "But seriously, what are we going to do?" "First, we will watch phase one of those superhero movies I've been talking about. You really must live under a rock. How have you not seen them?" Ali'i rolled her eyes. "Then, we'll walk the beach at sunset looking for shells and sand dollars." "You mean I'll go for the sunset walk while you roll beside me?" "I could sue you for making fun of a cripple." "Do it. I'm smarter than you, so I would get the lawsuit thrown out on baseless charges." "Baseless? You got a lot of nerve, young lady." "Young lady? I am 14 and you are 11. That is no way to talk to your superior, young man." "Hm. Well, look who's tutoring who. Age doesn't account for everything. I can't help that I'm a child prodigy. With California's public education system right now, I don't think skipping a grade or two counts for much," laughed Auli'i. "Hey, it's not my fault the material is so easy, or the fact that Martian drills me at home. My big brain, being confined to a wheelchair, and Martian's regimented schedule all contributed to me skipping those grades." "Yes, yes, but of course, darling." Cyrus chuckled softly. "Can I ask you a question?" asked Ali'i, flipping back to normal. "Fire away." "Why do you call him Martian? Have you not seen the way he acts?" Ali shrugged and nodded in agreement. "No, that's not it. As a kid, I had difficulty pronouncing my T's. He thought it was cute. I think it's funny. We both win. Plus, he is very different from anyone else I've ever met. So it just kind of fits, you know? Why don't you call him Dad?" I, well, there was this time when I was in kindergarten and we had to make finger paintings for our parents. Everyone was busy painting, and as the teacher was making her rounds, and she asked me who I was making mine for, you can imagine her confusion when I said Martian. They both took a minute to laugh. When I went home that day and gave him the painting, he loved it, of course, because, I'm a genius. Cyrus did an upper crust impression. Ali'i rolled her eyes while laughing. I asked him what you just asked me, attempting his best Martin impression. "I adopted you, Cyrus. I am not your father, but I am indeed your guardian. Dare I say, guardian angel. One day you will meet your parents, and when you do, I would still like to be your Martian, if you'll let me." "Aw, that is so cute." Cyrus shook his head, embarrassed. "Meh, depends. So, when are you going to meet them?" He said 16, or when I start walking. Ali'i raised her eyebrows in shock. "When you start walking? What is that supposed to mean?" "With how Martian speaks? Literally." "Then get to walking, young man. I don't think I can wait till you're 16. "Yes, Mom," Cyrus said, smiling. "Now, I have a question for you." "Shoot." "Why are you here? You're obviously brilliant and really didn't need my help. You mean here in tutoring or here in San Diego?" "Yes," Ali chuckled. "Well, here in tutoring because I wasn't in school for the last 2 years. My family moved when my father got called on to be a governing chief. So during that time, I learned a lot of things that were interesting, but had very little to do with things like math, science, or anything we've gone over together. So I needed a refresher. And here I am. As to why I'm here in San Diego, putting it plainly, it was so I could escape my father." Cyrus tilted his head with curiosity. My father is one of the three main chiefs that makes decisions for our people, but we were outsiders coming in. It was very controversial, my father being appointed as one of the chiefs of our nation. Suffice it to say, my family and I were treated pretty ruthlessly in attempts to get us to leave. 2 years of this turned my father into a different person, and I wanted out. Instead of letting me go alone, like I had planned, my mother came with me instead. She said I didn't have to do things alone, and dropped everything to come with. I made her promise not to say anything if she decided to come, and that's what we did. She grabbed a bag of clothes, and we left, then and there, said Ali'i, slightly embarrassed. Your mother is a good woman. Yeah, she really is. Listen, I'm a little embarrassed, honestly. So don't you dare make fun of me for this, or I'll steal your wheelchair's battery pack and leave you stranded, okay? You got it. Anyway, my father took me and my brother and sister out of school and to a different island when I was 12. And wait. You have a brother and sister? Yes, I do. Now shut up and let me finish. Sorry. When we were taken out of school, we moved to another island called Ni'ihau and were taught in the nation's ancient ways. At first, it was fascinating, but it got old real quick. Mom and dad started fighting more, everybody shunned us. I didn't want to live like that, so I left. She had a lot of tension on her face. Cyrus hurt seeing her like that. Why San Diego? Asked Cyrus. The house we are in right now belongs to my uncle. He's my mom's older brother. He would always tell us we had a place to stay if we decided to go to the mainland. My father and our nation forbid leaving the islands. Since they forbid it, I did it. So far, it's worked out pretty well. Your father, is he bad? Ali'i paused and thought for a moment. He's not a bad man, Cyrus. I love my father very much. He's very passionate about something I don't believe in, and I feel he was trying to force me to believe it. His priorities are mixed up. That's the best way I can put it. Silence filled the space. Not knowing what else to say, Cyrus changed the subject. I'm excited to try this mahi mahi. Your mother is definitely cooler than you. Well, I can cook just as good as her. I doubt that. Also, Ali'i pointed her finger right at Cyrus. Give some effort by giving her a kiss on the cheek. She has been worrying that she is coming on too strong. Try. Make sure she feels some love back. Or else. Ali'i made a fist at Cyrus, and he gulped. I will be watching. I'll be sure to put some chapstick on and pucker up. How loud do you want the smooch to be when I give her a kiss? Ali'i punched him in the arm. Ow! Tutoring ended at 11:30 on the last day. Cyrus and Ali'i said goodbye and thanked Miss Dougal before they left. She smiled at their words of appreciation. Martin wasn't kidding when he said gratitude goes a long way. The sun was shining, and a light breeze was coming from the ocean. The perfect day to end tutoring and enjoy their freedom. Martin was out front waiting. Aloha, Ali'i, said Martin with a grin. Cyrus rolled his eyes hard. Aloha, Martian. You're dressed so nice for our lunch appointment. It was true. Martin wore a light blue shirt tucked into black chinos with a belt, and black dress shoes shined to perfection. Well, shall we be on our way? Your mother did say around noon, correct? That's right. We got 10 minutes, so let's get going. Shoots, summer tutoring, Ali'i said, giving the school the shaka. The drive after tutoring remained the same all summer. 7 minutes talking about Ali'i and Hawaii. Martin's questions were endless. Aloha means hello, goodbye, and I love you? Yep. It also means something else. Alo means face to face or to share, whereas ha means the breath of life. Aloha, it was, and still is, used in tandem with our traditional greeting, where we embrace, put our heads together, and inhale and then exhale deeply. We share our breath of life. Wow. said Cyrus and Martin in unison. Ali'i smiled. Hard to resist captivated listeners. They rolled past the best donut shop in town. Cyrus loved the donut shop, and so did Ali'i. Only now and then had Martin taken Cyrus there as a treat. Now that Cyrus had a friend, they went at least twice a week. They pulled up to Auli'i and Kamalani's house. A little wall protected a tiny front yard, while a pinkish hue splotched the walls of the house. Before Auli'i reached the door, it burst open, and out came her mother. Smiling ear to ear, she embraced her daughter with a hug and a kiss, to which Auli'i returned. Then she pushed her aside and came towards Martin and Cyrus at a frightening speed. Cyrus could see where Auli'i had gotten her ninja skills. "Oh, honey, it's so nice to see you." "It's great to see you too." Before he could finish his sentence, Kamalani swooped down and gave Cyrus a hug and smothered him in kisses. Cyrus peeked over Kamalani's shoulder and saw Auli'i pointing at him. Cyrus quickly gave Kamalani a kiss on the cheek with an audible smack. Kamalani swooned, and Auli'i nodded in approval. Finishing up, Kamalani turned her attention to Martin. Auli'i and Cyrus glanced at each other. They had a bet as to whether Martin would extend his hand. Every time Martin spoke to Kamalani, he had always stuck out a hand first, to which Kamalani would ignore and give him a peck on the cheek and a hug. Auli'i said he would wise up and just accept it. Martin was a creature of habit, so Cyrus bet he would still go for the handshake. Winner got to choose what they did the first day they hung out. Cyrus made his way closer to Auli'i and looked around excitedly. Birds chirped, cars drove by on the main drag, and a cloaked man stood on the corner. Cyrus gave a double take and then returned his attention to Martin and Kamalani. "This is gonna be good." "It is so kind of you to invite us over for lunch, Mrs. Foelau Toalasi," said Martin, extending his hand. Completely ignoring the extended hand, Kamalani went in for the kill. "Dang it," whispered Auli'i, putting her head into her hands. Cyrus bobbed his head slightly. The moment Auli'i looked at him, Cyrus stuck out his tongue, and Auli'i made a fist at him. "Sorry, Mr. Weatherford. We're huggers in this family. And please, call me Kamalani." "Oh, I noticed. We are very excited to be here, Kamalani." "Well, come in. The fish is ready and everything is hot. So let's eat. Auli'i, make them comfortable while I go grab the food for the table." Cyrus continued to bob his head as he wheeled past Auli'i into their house. Auli'i looked at him blankly. Cyrus whispered, just loud enough for Auli'i to hear, "Winner, winner, chicken dinner." "Weren't you listening? My mom said it was fish, not chicken." Auli'i stuck out her tongue and locked the door behind them. Cyrus saw a flicker of light behind him as they entered the house. Must have been his eyes adjusting. The house was small but open. The walls were decorated with paintings of the ocean and islands. These oceans were much different from the ones Cyrus saw every day. IB was nice and dirty thanks to the Tijuana estuary that leaked into the ocean. The deep blues and vibrant greens of the photos brought the living room to life. The light from the windows and the bright lights inside made the home feel inviting. Garlic and the smell of what Cyrus assumed was mahi-mahi marinated the room. It wasn't a strong, fishy smell like Cyrus had expected. It smelled almost sweet. The table was set nice and neat. In the center of the table was a jar of mysterious pinkish-orange liquid. Everything was new. Kamalani brought out the plates filled with fish, rice, and Okinawan sweet potato. The fish was cooked in a white sauce and garnished with green onions. The sweet potato blew Cyrus's mind. "It's purple." The look of surprise made Kamalani smile. Mouths watering and stomachs grumbling, Kamalani impressed both Martin and Cyrus with a word of prayer. It was the best fish Cyrus ever had. Not too strong, with a slight sweetness balanced by a garlic kick. The Okinawan sweet potato was really good too. It had a nice chewy texture with a pleasant, earthy, sweet taste. Martin went on and on about how delicious it was and insisted she pass him the recipe. Kamalani basked in the glow of Martin's compliments. Cyrus chatted with Auli'i about their plans for the rest of the summer, constantly reminding her that he'd won the bet. Life is pretty good. Kamalani, a thunderous voice bellowed from outside. Martin jumped, while both Kamalani and Auli'i's eyes filled with horror. Auli'i, I know you're in there. Cyrus had never seen Auli'i like this. She was visibly frightened and in disbelief. Auli'i? Who is that? Asked Cyrus. Bang, bang, bang. The house shook from the force of the mystery man knocking. Auli'i looked at her mother, who had regained some of her courage. Martin was already on his feet and in between the door and everyone else. Kamalani, what are we dealing with? Anything you can tell me will help, said Martin gravely. Bang, bang, bang. It's my husband. Open the door. He found us. Auli'i trailed off, looking at Kamalani in confusion. Bang, bang, bang. Kamalani, if he is violent, I will defend, said Martin. Martin had an expression Cyrus had never seen before. Martin didn't look worried or tense in the slightest. His shoulders were relaxed, but his expression was lethal. He was completely focused on the door. The banging stopped. Not a sound could be heard. Cyrus dared not breathe, it was so quiet. Rapid footsteps approached the door. Bang! The door burst from its hinges, revealing a mammoth of a man. He stood a couple inches shorter than Martin, but definitely had him beat in girth. He had dark brown skin, long black hair, and tree trunks for limbs. Behind the man stood what seemed to be a younger version of himself. The man looked absolutely infuriated. His brows furrowed and his cheeks moved as he exhaled loudly, like a horse. The boy looked conflicted. As soon as they got through the door, the large man marched straight to the living room, the man-child following close behind. Martin held his ground, not flinching when the man came face to face. I don't know who you are, but stay out of my family affairs. The man began to walk past Martin, but before he could, Martin put his arm up, blocking his path. In the calmest, yet most dangerous way, Martin said, If you have something to say it right here. We heard you from out there. They can hear you just fine right here. A look of pure venom came across the man's eyes. Love, please, said Kamalani. We will hear what you have to say, but please be calm. You're scaring us. Love? The man said incredulously. You call me love after leaving me in the middle of the night, taking my daughter away from me? Dad, it wasn't Mom. You don't get to speak right now, Auli'i. I received my new position leading our nation and you abandon me when I need you the most? You up and leave? Martin flinched. Wait, what did you say? Whispered Martin. For the last time, stay out of my family affairs. Martin's look of focus was replaced by intrigue. Don't blame Mom. She didn't want me to go alone. I made her promise not to say anything, Dad. I just couldn't live isolated like that anymore. It was too much like a cult. You may believe in that nonsense, but I never did. I never had a choice. Nonsense? Choice? You have no idea what you're talking about. This way of life has been around for thousands of years. The Lumen Caligo is out there somewhere right now. We are lucky to be a part of it. You felt lucky enough. The rest of us were just along for the ride, yelled Ali'i back. Mongoose, I know Ni'ihau isn't Oahu, but it was a chance for... You guys are from Ni'ihau? Interjected Martin. Martian is acting very out of character. This all makes sense now, he continued. You guys are... That's it. You are out of here. The mammoth of a man grabbed Martin's outstretched arm and began removing him from the house. Cyrus gasped, suddenly feeling very helpless and worried for Martin. The man was easily twice Martin's weight. Martin whirled around, and a skirmish ensued. Both men moved impossibly fast, going toe to toe with each other. Kamalani started yelling for them to stop. The young boy began making his way towards the fight. Ali'i got up and, in her ninja way, got between the boy and the fight. Putting a hand to his face, she shook her head and scowled at the boy. He stopped in his tracks. Although he was much bigger than her, he seemed frightened of the expression she gave him. In the blink of an eye, Martin had this Goliath of a man on the floor at his mercy. The man was face down, with his hand twisted up behind him. Martin looked unfazed. I'm going to ask you again, started Martin, looking up at Kamalani. Are you from Ni'ihau? Yes, we come from Ni'ihau, said Kamalani frantically. Who are you, and what do you call yourselves? Asked Martin. Hawaiians. What else would we call ourselves? Responded the man furiously. Martin twisted the man's arm slightly, and the man winced. Think carefully before you respond. Who are you? What do you call yourselves? And what do you want with the Lumen Caligo? Asked Martin. The man's eyes widened. Realization filled everyone's eyes in the room except for Cyrus. He had absolutely no idea what was going on. The man's tone went calm. I am Manaya Foalau Tuolasi, and this is my son, Kimo Foalau Tuolasi. To some, we are known as Terums. Martin released the man from his grip and stumbled back towards the dining room. Cyrus witnessed yet another expression he had never seen cross Martin's face. Shock. Pure shock. The man stood up quickly. He rotated his shoulder a few times with eyes that never left Martin. He was now the subject of interest. Now I have a question for you, began the man. Who are you, and what do you call yourselves? Martin cupped his hands to his mouth and mumbled to himself. Cyrus could only make out a few sentences. This is too soon. I wanted him to wait till he was 16. How can I contain this? No, it's too late. But no, it is too late. I'll have to go explain. Martin looked at Cyrus intently. Worry filled his eyes. Hey, I'm talking to you. Don't make me ask you again. Who are you, and what do you call yourselves? Martin looked at the ground, let out a long sigh, and then began unbuttoning his fancy shirt. My people are known by many names, but our existence has nearly been erased in the memories of the outside world. Martin began removing his shirt. There was a vest of some sort underneath. But to those who still know the ancient ways, we are known by a certain name. The sound of ripping Velcro and ruffling filled the room. Facing towards Manaya, he let the shirt and vest drop to the floor. Cyrus's jaw also dropped to the floor. Like a roll of wrapping paper being unraveled, two giant white wings unfurled from his torso and filled up the room. I'm dreaming. This is a dream. I am Martin James Weatherford, and to some, I am known as a Lumen. Martin was glorious to behold. The wings seemed to be pulsating light from within. The feathers were individually highlighted and were as fascinating to look at individually as the wings were collectively. Each feather looked like a real-life Van Gogh brushstroke. The detail was so fine. Manaya looked relieved, but unsatisfied with the response. Pointing his sausage finger at Cyrus, he gruffly asked, What about him, your son? All eyes turned to Cyrus. Ali'i was looking Cyrus up and down as if she had missed something. This is Cyrus Ganymede Weatherford. And Martin looked at Ali'i, paused, and then said, He is the Lumen Caligo. Manaya let out an audible exhale of disbelief. I don't believe you. Prove it. Martin reached into his back pocket and extracted his wallet. Carefully, he removed a single feather. It was small and detailed. Martin then slowly rotated the feather, revealing the darkest black on one side and softest white on the other. Kamalani fell to her knees and began crying. Auli'i cupped her mouth, and both Chemo and Manaya fell to one knee with a strange hand gesture in between their eyes. Cyrus had no idea how to react. There were wings, strange sounding words, and tears following a conflict. This was too much for him to process. He had freaking wings this whole time? Nothing could surprise him now. Manaya got up slowly from his kneeling position, and Chemo followed suit. Turning to Martin, he asked in a humble tone, May I approach? Martin nodded. Manaya began walking towards Cyrus. Cyrus gulped nervously. The man was much larger up close. Leaning down to him, he took Cyrus's hand, interlaced their ring fingers, and said, We've waited for you for a long time, little one. Know that me and my family will always be loyal to you. I was blinded by my rage, but now I see it was fate that brought my wife and daughter here. Anything we can do to aid you, you can count on us. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Foalau Tuolasi. I will keep that in mind. Cyrus was being treated like a king, and he didn't know why. Standing up, Manaya turned back to Martin. I must inform my nation. I am one of the 3 governing chiefs and hold sway. This will awaken my people to action. I will depart back to the islands with the news. No, said Martin. There are too many with ill intentions within each of the governing bodies. He must remain a secret. I do not see why. These are glad tidings. Everyone will be thrilled to learn the Lumen Caligo lives, Manaya said excitedly. No, he doesn't even know about all of us. Manaya and Kamalani audibly gasped. Kamalani had stopped her sobbing. Regardless, I will tell my people that Lumen Caligo lives. When my family returns back with me, I am not going back, said Ali'i defiantly. Yes, you are, said her father with the same fire Ali'i had. No, I am not. I refuse to return to that black hole of an island. I'm staying right here. If I don't come back with you, your sister will pay the price of your abandonment with her life. Auli'i and Kamalani gasped. Great big tears welled up in Kamalani and Auli'i's eyes. Then Chemo issued his first words. After you guys left, the council met to decide how they would track you down. They were going to send Marquise to hunt you down and kill you, but we were able to convince them to allow us. Their only condition was they had to have Akela as collateral, said Chemo somberly. Not my baby, said Kamalani, sobbing. They gave us 4 fortnights. That was 40 days ago, said Manaya. I told her to come. I begged her to come, but she insisted on staying to help Daddy and Tutu, sobbed Ali'i. Sailing back will take a month. We will have to send a godwit to let them know we have found you, said Manaya. Wait, there may be another way, said Martin. All eyes turned to Martin. With the Lumen Caligo's permission, you may utilize modern technology, thus foregoing a sailing expedition. Fly back with me. Leave your family with Cyrus, and I will help negotiate the release of this Akela. I presume she is your daughter? Yes, my youngest. How will we justify my family not coming along? The rules may be harsh, but they have preserved our way of life these past 300 years. You know this, Lumen. Swear your children to Cyrus. Everyone froze. Swear them to Cyrus as the Virtus Latoris, and the council will have no choice but to accept the new conditions. That might work, said Manaya. What if it fails? What's the backup plan? Negotiate more aggressively, said Martin with a shrug. Manaya and Kamalani looked at each other. Kamalani nodded, and then Manaya extended his hand. Agreed. Martin shook his hand firmly. Turning to Chemo and Ali'i, Manaya and Martin gestured to Cyrus as they made their approach. Everyone gathered around Cyrus. He was surrounded. Now, you two are going to be sworn to Cyrus as his designated Virtus Lautores. You know what that is, yes? Asked Martin. Chemo and Ali'i looked at each other nervously, then back to Martin and nodded. Martin clasped their hands with Cyrus's, interlocking their ring fingers while the rest of their fingertips touched, almost like some sort of hand teepee. Chemo's meaty hand took Cyrus's left hand. Ali'i took hold of his right. You will repeat the oath in Latin. Repeat after me. Et omne quod ego dico, et lux in tenebris, et ingressio, dum ultima dii virtutis meae, et in uvenes armigere euraure praesidio. They repeated it solemnly in unison. After they uttered the final words, they separated. Turning back to the family, he said, We leave immediately. Kamalani, I ask you move your stuff to our house tonight. I will advise our landlord of the situation. I will pack my stuff for this trip and purchase the tickets. Kamalani nodded and immediately went to her room. Cyrus, give Manaya permission to fly by airplane. What? Please, just do it, said Martin calmly. Okay, I give you permission to fly by plane. Manaya smiled and bowed with his hands together and ring fingers bent. Meet me by the van. I must speak with Cyrus privately, said Martin to Manaya. Martin picked up the vest that covered his wings and the shirt he'd been wearing. Manaya nodded, picked up the door he'd broke down, placed it next to the entrance, and went outside. You two, Martin said, pointing to Ali'i and Chemo. Come with me. I have some instructions for you. Curiosity and confusion filled their faces. Cyrus moved his wheelchair forward. Martin put up a hand. Not yet, Cyrus. You're after them. Martin led Ali'i and Chemo to the kitchen. Cyrus peered into the kitchen. He couldn't hear what Martin was saying, but he could see the siblings' faces. Shock, disbelief, and surprise filled their faces. What was worse, they kept glancing over at Cyrus. It felt like middle school all over again. People talking about him behind his back. This hurt more, though. Cyrus cared about the people doing the talking. Martin pointed to his back and then said something Cyrus couldn't hear. Both Ali'i and Chemo gasped in unison. Their gaze went straight to Cyrus with the most intense look of disbelief and pain. Ali'i and Chemo's eyes didn't stray from Cyrus this time. Chemo looked at him like he was the alien. Ali'i looked at him with the utmost compassion. What is Martian saying? Martin snapped his fingers and the siblings' attention returned back to him. He expanded his chest and wings while pointing his fingers at the siblings. The siblings nodded emphatically and then returned back to the dining room with Cyrus. Both of their eyes were glazed over and their mouths hung slightly open. Ali'i gave Cyrus a hug and then followed Kamalani into her room. Martian, I'm so confused. What is going on? Asked Cyrus. Cyrus, I wouldn't know where to begin. Since the short version would only leave you frustrated, I will leave the explaining to Miss Palermo. Martin faltered. He never faltered when he spoke. I need some time to gather my thoughts and explain. I will call Miss Palermo right now to let her know. Martin whipped out his phone and quickly put it up to his ear after finding Miss Palermo's number. Martian, that isn't good enough. How do you have wings? began Cyrus. Miss Palermo, I am doing well. How about you? Forgive my bluntness, but I will cut right to the chase. It is time. I have to leave right now and will be back soon. But I need you to explain everything to Cyrus and yes, I mean everything. Miss Palermo, I don't have time. I'm leaving as soon as I grab my things. Martin paused as Miss Palermo rambled furiously in a muffled fury of words. Can you at least give me something? Whispered Cyrus. Martin put his hand up softly. His focus was on the phone call. After what seemed like 10 minutes, the muffled rant ceased. Miss Palermo, I will assist where I can. I need you to remove the prosthetic skin. I've hidden as long as I could, but now is the time. I trust in you and am forever grateful for everything you have done. I now ask that you do this for me. Do you understand? More muffled rants began, but this time Martin cut her off. Explain and remove the prosthetic skin. Understand? Said Martin seriously. Cyrus could make out a muffled yes from Miss Palermo. Thank you. I'll be at the house in 7 minutes. You may ask questions while I pack, said Martin as he hung up. Martian, I want you to tell me whatever this is. Miss Palermo always takes the scenic route, pleaded Cyrus desperately. This time, you might enjoy the scenic route. You'll get more information about the day we found you and what we did to conceal you. Now, I really have to go. He wrapped his arms and wings around Cyrus in what Cyrus could only describe as a double hug. I love you. When I have the words and composure, I will explain things. For now, be patient with Miss P. Martin added with a sad smile. I love you too. I mean, wings. How could I have missed that all these years? Asked Cyrus as Martin let go and began walking towards the door. Martin paused, turned around, and with a warm smile said, I am not the only one with wings in our household. With that, he was gone. Fit hit the shan.